When Mayor Michelle Wu made history as the first person of color to be elected to Boston's top office, the daughter of immigrants from Taiwan, she was in good company across the nation. In Cincinnati, Aftab Purvel was elected as the first Asian American mayor in that city, the son of an Indian father and Tibetan mother, both of whom immigrated to the U.S. as well. And in Seattle, Mayor-elect Bruce Harrell is the first Asian American in that office, the son of an African American father and Japanese American mother who spent a portion of her childhood in an internment camp. And while each historic victory brought the nation at least a little closer to equal representation, we still have a long way to go. A report from the Reflective Democracy Campaign found that as of mid-2020, people who identify as Asian American Pacific Islanders made more than 6% of the total population, but less than a single percent of elected leaders across all levels of government. The lowest degree of representation when compared to any other demographic in the country. Here now to discuss how far we have come and what steps we still need to take is State Representative Tram Nguyen and Paul Watanabe, a professor of political science and the director of the Institute for Asian American Studies at UMass Boston. Thanks to both of you for joining me. Good to see you both.
Welcome.
Good
yes,
to see you. Thanks for having us.
So, Paul, it was a big night across the country in some ways for Asian American elected officials. In New York, we're talking about mayors and state reps and all that, but there were 5 Asian American city councilors that were elected. There were some other Asian Americans who made it to office, and there's always this not-so-secret network of female Asian Americans who are running campaigns who are really making the history. Is this a moment that we've been waiting for, or what work do we need to do to get better representation?
Well, it is a moment that we've been waiting for. And as you pointed out, there have been some significant strides made in recent years, not only across the country and in Massachusetts itself. We've sort of gone from almost having no representation about 10 years ago to being, for example, in the Massachusetts State House. I think the Asian Pacific American Caucus actually is the largest caucus of color now in the Massachusetts legislature. That's a tremendous change. And I'm in California right now, and the fact that Michelle Wu won away in Boston, 3,000 miles away, is making big national news back here in California as well. So it's a wonderful moment for Asian Americans. But as you pointed out, we're still a long way to go in terms of getting the representation that equals our size of the population. But we're getting there. We're very far away from where even a year ago, when people in the United States were polled as to naming a famous Asian American person, almost over 40% couldn't name a single Asian American. And now I hope they can name the Vice President of the United States or the Mayor of Boston or the Mayor of Cincinnati or people like that when they talk about these political figures. And it's a significant change, but it's a change that's short still where we need to be.
Yeah, Representative Nguyen, Asian Americans as immigrants in this country have been here just about the longest, right? I mean, we have a great history of immigrants coming and working in all parts of this country, but building the political machine that you need in order to take office has been a long time coming. And I know in Boston, before Michelle Wu, you couldn't win City Hall as mayor unless you had Chinatown and those areas and those communities backing your campaign, and they've always been important. But what we are seeing now, I think, is an expression of that power in a more explicit way. You're elected, and as Paul's pointed out, there are victories all across the nation. Are you feeling that excitement and that in the moment has come right now?
Absolutely. Asian Americans are, as you know, the fastest growing segment of eligible voters, and we are becoming a voting bloc. And it's really exciting to see that from 2016 to 2020, Asian Americans, or AAPIs, have the highest increase in voter turnout. And this could be attributed to many factors, including the target that's been put on our backs with the racist rhetorics of the previous administration with the China virus and the likes. But there's also that excitement for the Vice President Harris and having her be the very first Black and Asian American woman elected. But then we also need to talk about the long-term investments that's been happening in our communities. Community organizing, naturalization, voter registration, and just voter education overall that has been an effort that's been ongoing. And I'm really excited that people are starting to understand how government can work for them. And the other exciting thing is that it seems as though the second generation children of immigrants are very activated. They're very active in their community with civic engagement and political activism. And so I'm excited to see the changes that will come for generations to come, because they're now starting to be a voting age. And it's really exciting to see how they're looking to be engaged in very different ways.
Yeah, Representative Nguyen, my mother worked very closely with the Cambodian and Vietnamese populations in Revere back in the 1980s, and often would tell me about the challenges of trying to get folks, and this is not unique to Asian American communities, but trying to get folks to trust government and to be able to be engaged in government in a way that they feel the government will serve them and they can serve the government. We're now a couple of generations, I hope, away from that immigrant wave. Are you feeling that those connections are now really starting to be strong, and that folks are feeling like they can really count on government and be part of government?
Well, as you know, the AAPI community is not a monolith. We have very different ethnicities, and we also have very different immigration waves. So it really depends on which community you're talking about. Some of the Japanese Americans, Chinese Americans have been here for somewhat longer. And for Vietnamese Americans, most of us came over in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And so prior to getting elected, I was a legal services attorney working and helping very vulnerable people. We saw the hesitation of getting involved, and people would question, why should I go to you and reveal any personal information about myself? But what we're seeing now is that as we're getting more information translated, the information is getting to people in different ways. And the organizing, I have to say, is a lot more robust. So with that combination of more language access and organizing, I'm hopeful that people are starting to believe that the government can work for them, and that there are now more people in elected positions who are looking like them. And I think that you have to see it to be and to believe it. And as more of us become elected, I'm hopeful that people will have more trust in government.
Professor, the representative makes the point, of course, that not a monolith like any community, different factions, different points of view, but lots of national press about how the Democrats may be not really in the best position to get the votes that they think that they have earned from many Asian communities across the country. If you had advice to the Democrats as to what they need to do to really be connected with the Asian American community at large, writ large, of course, the top line, not the many communities, what should they be doing?
Well, Asian Americans have historically and pretty consistently been Democratic in their support, particularly at the national level. And this includes even some of the Southeast Asian groups who have a greater tendency a little bit to be more Republican in their tendency, but still overwhelmingly Asian Americans have been a reliable supporters of the Democratic Party. And in my argument should be going forward is part of the reason why what the Democrats should do is not be what the Republicans have become. In some respects, the Republican Party has clearly become the party of anti-immigration, which speaks to their situation, as the representative points out. They're really questioning the transformation of this country from a country that was predominantly white to a country that's going to be a country made up of people of color within about 20 or 30 years. And that change is something that I think the Republican Party seems to be resistant to. So in some ways, the ability to reach out to these new populations, to immigrant populations of people of color, and to embrace the changes taking place and not to resist it, I think is the way forward, both for the Democratic Party and frankly, I think for the nation.
Representative, one of the things I was struck by on Election Day, and also from Mayor Wu's speech during her swearing in, was just how she was able to represent so many immigrants in America, not just Asian American. And of course, her efforts in speaking Mandarin, I believe, and Spanish and English, and pointing out the difficulties that building that she loves so much, City Hall, the difficulties the barriers that building presented to many, both disabled folks and differently abled folks and immigrants. it does seem to me that there is a capturing of immigrant power that's happening, even with Asian Americans whose families have been here for many, many, many generations. But it does seem to be something that's being expressed that will help to bring us back together to sort of our aspirational ideas of being a nation of immigrants.
Absolutely. Mayor Wu and so many others are changing the face of politics and really harnessing that power of immigrants. And for AAPI especially, we have the issue of being the perpetual foreigner, of people seeing us as not part of the community. And so this is exactly why community building and collaboration and the sharing of cultures with other communities of color is just so important for our community as we build on political power with other communities of color.
Professor, I'm wondering what you see happening over the next few years. Are you hopeful? Do you see folks that are going to be ascending from state lawmaking to the federal level to Congress? Is there a wave that's coming that we should be paying attention to?
Well, I hope there is a wave, but I hope it's really one that I really enjoy the fact that it's much of its focus at the local level. You talk about some ways the building of the machine. That's kind of laughable, this notion that the Asian Americans have built this machine. I'm sure the representative will say that her being elected was no product of any machine. She decided one day to run. And Michelle Wu was really a product of making a fairly recent decision. She didn't have a big machine, long experience behind her. And I think that tendency, the desire to simply say that we want to impact politics at all levels, including the local level, which I think is important, is something that I hope that Asian Americans and other people of other races will abide by. That in some ways, that really focusing on the local level is a way to have impact. Everybody wants to be president of the United States or United States senator, but in some ways, the biggest impact are the way in which the people like Representative Nguyen and people like the Nina Liangs, who's the head of the Quincy City Council, and people like Michelle Wu or people like Lisa Wong, who is the mayor of Fitchburg. These are the people who are going to have a real change, and I hope they set their sights not necessarily beyond these offices, and if deserving, I hope they'll fill into them as well. But I really like the fact that
maybe we can talk some. Maybe we could talk some folks to join the school committees too.
Exactly.
All right, Paul Watanabe, thank you so much, Representative Tram Nguyen. We appreciate you joining us. Have a great holiday season. We look forward to talking to you some more. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good
Thank you very much.
Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Take care.